Hello, this is Michael Pierce, also known as the Celestial Ronin, here to talk to you again about Jar Binks. Who would have thought? So we've been talking a lot actually about Jar Binks at the subreddit Darth Jar Jar. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend checking it out. I'm posting there as Celestial Ronin as well, Celestial underscore Ronin to be exact. So Darth Lord, but also Saboteur. So check this out. We have a few scenes that we've been looking at that we found that not only one but two scenes where Jar Jar is working on the pod racer. So it seems like there's a very consistency about how often Jar Jar is working on that thing. And not only that, it's the same engine he's working on. And this is the same engine that later on Anakin would use to divert power from to save the race. So it's interesting the involvement that Jar Jar plays a direct role in the pod race win. So with that, we can establish Jar Jar knows his way around ship mechanics, even if it's something that he may have not encountered on Naboo. So let's go back to the Queen's cruiser during the blockade run from the Trade Federation blockade. So we see that during the blockade run, Jar Jar is escorted down to the droid hangar by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he's told not to touch anything. Of course, Jar Jar being Jar Jar, makes a big deal even to the droids. He's all, hey-o, boyos. And the scene cuts, more blockade running. Bam, the shield generator goes out. Alarm calls, droids are thrust into action. During this scene, when the droids are undocking themselves, you see Jar Jar just kind of lean in off to something off camera. And then in that very instant, R2-D2 just comes up and bumps him for no apparent reason before he goes up to the roof of the ship to repair the shield generator. So what was Jar Jar looking at? According to an image that I found from one of these old encyclopedia type books that was released around the time the Phantom Menace was released. It was part of the kind of the extra material released around the film. Like the kind of it's a technical schematic of the ship, and we see here where Jar Jar is looking off screen is this thing called a circuitry patch. It's a circuitry patch bay. Now, what is a patch bay? Now, in the real world, in IT, a patch bay or a patch panel is something you can use as kind of like in networking. It's where you have like your switch. It's basically an area where a lot of your infrastructure for a network will come into one location. It's convenient to work on. It's a very tight space. As far as the application to the film, a circuitry patch bay lends itself. This might be circuitry for the entire ship, for maybe perhaps easy access for the droids to work on all the ship's systems. So if that's the case, this very capable Gungan isolated. As the droids are on top of the roof, most of them destroyed, besides R2-D2, by himself, is looking at and has access to the entire network of the ship's systems. So after they break the blockade, suddenly there's not enough energy for the hyperdrive. That's all they say there. But then upon landing, Obi-Wan Kenobi looks at the hyperdrive, which, by the way, on this ship schematic is really far away. There's no access from the underbelly of the ship. And the way that the hyperdrive comes out of its bay is through a very public area of the ship. So there's no way that it was touched directly if it was sabotage. But upon landing on Tatooine, Obi-Wan Kenobi diagnoses that the hyperdrive is broken. Parts need to be replaced. Why would that be? What would happen with the shield generator that would cause the hyperdrive to receive critical damage? Unless it was purposely done through a patch panel that you can probably overload the system. The description is also listed there for the hyperdrive on that encyclopedia, that it's a work of precision art. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of something in electronics um, um, a circuit board going out. You have some those little things can break. A circuit can jump, fry a whole motherboard because one little component skips over. So what if Jar Jar Binks was able to overload the hyperdrive system, thus causing it to have serious problems, forcing the ship to land prior to its engagement to Coruscant? Of course, I talk about this a little bit in a document. What would be the motivation for this? Personally, the motivation for sabotage is the elimination of the unpredictable and meddlesome Qui-Gon Jinn. From the very get-go, we see that Darth Maul was the instrument of dealing with the Jedi. That Sidious would send his apprentice Darth Maul to deal with the Jedi. Upon landing on upon landing at Tatooine, we see that if we take credence into Jar Jar's force manipulation of the captain and the queen, that Jar Jar Binks sends the queen with them into town to always be close, so that he always has an eye on her. Later on, we see that Darth Maul arrives on the planet mysteriously. I talk about this in a previous video, as well as some of my documentation, which I'll link below. That Darth Maul comes. He arrives the night before the pod race, but doesn't engage the Jedi until after the pod race is done, and then at a moment where Qui-Gon Jinn is isolated away from the rest of the ship. So that seems to be his purpose. The purpose of the whole Tatooine landing was the elimination of Qui-Gon Jinn. Some people try to theorize that perhaps if Jar Jar Binks knew about Anakin Skywalker beforehand, and that the Chosen One, the theory, everything behind that, none of it's on camera, so I don't like to speculate in that direction. But I can speculate based on what's on the film, the behavior of Darth Maul throughout the film, his engagement, the elimination of Qui-Gon Jinn, his then his showboating after Qui-Gon Jinn is dead, instead of doing anything else productive, allowing a moment of weakness that allowed his death, seems to all hint at that his only purpose was to kill Qui-Gon Jinn, with no other role to play in the film. So it seems to me that sabotage was a means to an end of Qui-Gon Jinn at that time. So-called life debt that Jar Jar Binks had with Qui-Gon could very much be calculated back to that. Is that he always wanted to be near Qui-Gon, get off to be able to control Qui-Gon. But what was the main kicker that might have changed Jar Jar's mind about being able to tag along with Qui-Gon Jinn? The travel through the planet's core. Some try to hint that Jar Jar's hesitation during that scene might be a reason why he's not a Dark Lord. But it was during that scene that Qui-Gon Jinn showed some brass behavior, such as going through the planet core, wanting to go alone without Jar Jar's presence, may have ended in disaster. Especially if you believe that Jar Jar Binks used the Force to influence the sea creatures to allow their safe escape. There's always a bigger fish. Qui-Gon just kind of casually mentions as a giant sea creature saves their life. Especially Jar Jar's reactions. Misa thinking I'm going to go back home now. To raise the hand. So there's a lot of different things that are going on, and I think it's because of a change of heart. First, it was about controlling the Jedi, but the discovery that Qui-Gon Jinn was not controllable, not into a calculated way that Jar Jar Binks would want to. That was further reinforced by the whole pod race scene, that the pod race bet put Jar Jar in a position where he couldn't control its outcome. The Watto, being immune to the Force, would play a major plot device as to why that would be. Why would he not approve the whole mouthing, well, I don't approve, through Padme? would only indicate that he does not like something about this plan. That part of the plan he doesn't like is this luck factor, the factor of the unknown, the factor that can't be controlled. There's someone who's immune to force persuasion, that dominance of the force that he can't have as a Sith. Going through some of the wiki, some of the extended universe stuff, we show that there is such thing as a more powerful Sith technique, rather than just a mind trick, but rather a domination of the mind to force someone to think or act the way that you want them to. Jar Jar seems to display handedly. So everything that happens on Tatooine is a result of a chance discovery of a very talented child, but at the end goal, the reason why they were there was the elimination of Qui-Gon Jinn in a controlled manner. So besides that, what are your thoughts? I personally think of it more of a straightforward storyline, that perhaps the prophecy is true, that we don't know much about the origin of the prophecy. Anakin perhaps is just a factor of the Force. In the upcoming movie, there's a lot of mysteriousness around the location of Tatooine. Maybe there is a tie-in. I'm not sure. But I like to lend myself to believe that we have to look at what's on camera and trust some of the dialogue that's given. That Qui-Gon is in knowledge of a prophecy of a child conceived of the Force. We might have to just believe that's an actual thing in the movie. We don't know the origin of that prophecy. But what we do know, on scene, Jar Jar is left alone in the cargo bay. He could have sabotaged the hyperdrive, forcing them to land on a random planet, Tatooine. Maybe uncalculated that there would be Anakin Skywalker. So the other motivations would be, who else would be there? No one other than a chance opportunity to have Darth Maul sent there. In my documentation about how Jar Jar Binks could have been the source of the leak that led to Darth Maul being on Tatooine is that he could very easily have communicated the location via the Force to Sidious, who then sends Darth Maul. If that's the case, if that did happen, if Jar Jar was the source of the leak, that means Darth Maul was sent specifically to kill Qui-Gon Jinn. In no scenario could Darth Maul abducted the Queen, brought her back to Coruscant or to Naboo without making even more people aware that the Sith had returned. So I don't see them playing the only factor there is they playing the card. The play was Qui-Gon Jinn. He would be the play. He'd be the only reliable one that the council would even the Jedi Council would even consider that the Sith had returned. Would Obi-Wan Kenobi at that time, as a Padawan, know about the Sith, an organization that had been so-called extinct for 1,000 years? So a lot to consider here. I've been considering a lot. I hope you can join me in some of these discussions. If you are against this whole idea, I would love to hear your ideas. I'm using a lot of what I see on screen. So if you can come up with an argument from some things that are on screen, I would love to hear them. I haven't heard any good arguments, and some of the ones that are out there just come back to, oh, George Lucas is just bad at directing. He's bad at writing. But you know what? I've seen other George Lucas films before The Phantom Menace. I was around her. I'm 31 years old. I'm aware of the transition, the change of opinion that occurred around The Phantom Menace. It wasn't until the prequels were made that people thought George Lucas was bad at anything. So really, if this was just done on purpose and just poorly implemented at that time, because in my opinion, there's a lot of busyness in the film that distracts from this whole plot line. George Lucas had not been considered bad at this stuff before. So from the awards that he's won on other films to the writing he's done on other films, the story-wise, maybe individual dialogue lines. I'll give you that. Individual lines, perhaps George Lucas is not the best. Story crafting, world crafting, George Lucas I think is one of the best out there. And I don't want to say that all this is just happy happenstance. So if you can come at me with an argument better than George Lucas is bad, I would love to hear it.